Welcome to our monthly office hours. This is one of our best well-known public initiatives we have from the Copyright Community Steering Group, which is a steering group of Europeana. A few of our members are in this call. We also have sometimes external members, external people invited, which is the case also today. And these office hours, we center them around a certain topic where we have some quick presentations by people, and there's always room to ask questions. Regarding the households, we record these sessions. We didn't do that in the past, but what we do is we record only the presentations. No, we record the whole part, but we cut out the question part afterwards so that we have an archive at least of the presentations. So, but the questions, just to be able to keep it informal and interactive, there are no stupid questions, please. We are there for this reason. The questions will not be published online. These are just informal questions. Usually we have first presentations and then questions, which makes it easier to manage. But in this case, we decided we have 3 speakers and we will have some questions after each speaker because they are all presenting, approaching the topic from a specific point of view and presenting something very specific. So it's just easier to manage. First, we are doing this session now on public domain calculators. Public domain is really at a very important part of our working, of our activity. We work on Europeana public domain guidelines. We work on, we do public domain day activities. And so having tools ready for the heritage sector to use to be able to identify works that are in the public domain in their collections is obviously very relevant to us. And so we decided to host a session on that. First, Bart will speak. He's from the University of Glasgow, giving a more conceptual general framework. Maarten Zijnstra from IP2 will present one tool, a decisional tree tool. And then Bart Magnus from Memo will present a more computational tool where you can use data from Wikidata to help you decide whether your collection and in bulk to identify public domain works in your collections. So I'll start off with Bart, who is probably a better place to give more introduction to himself than I am. He's also one of our steering group members. Bart.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen, and hi, everyone. I'm Bart Meletti. I work for the Create Center, which is the Center for Regulation of the Creative Economy at the University of Glasgow. And as Ellen said, my presentation is rather introductory. So as you know, today's session is specifically about public domain calculators and calculations. What I plan to do is to use this resource, which hopefully you're all seeing now, copyrightuser.eu, to introduce you the concept of the public domain in a broader sense. So I'll get to that in a minute, but first of all, just a few words about what you're looking at. So this is a website, copyrightuser.eu, that we developed and launched last year as part of an Horizon 2020 consortium called Recreating Europe. And what the website intends to do is to make EU copyright law accessible to everyone. And it builds upon a previous website called copyrightuser.org, which focuses on UK copyright law. This one is about EU copyright law. And I would say the main innovation of this EU website is that in addition to being able to navigate the website with a traditional sitemap that allows you to go straight to the topic that you're interested in, you can also navigate the website using these infographics like this one you're looking at. And so yeah, the animation may be a bit clunky on a shared screen, but yeah, you can go to copyrightuser.eu and play more smoothly with it on your own. So these infographics, we call them educational, we call it an educational user experience. in the sense that, traditionally UX is supposed to be as straightforward and easy and intuitive as possible. Whereas in this case, as you can see, these infographics can be fairly cryptic, but that's kind of on purpose. So the idea is that once it may take some time to learn how to navigate the website, but once I've learned how to use it, then you've learned the thought process that one needs to follow in order to make informed decisions on copyright issues. So the website provides guidance on a number of topics, including the public domain, like here, as you can see, which is the focus of today's session. So, and more generally on, how to protect your work, how to use existing materials, how to exploit your rights, how to enforce them, and so on. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to introduce a slightly broader concept of the public domain. So as you may know, the public domain can be defined in different ways. The traditional way is the narrower one, the one we are focusing on in this session, which is basically the pool of materials that are free for everyone to use because they're out of copyright. So they were once protected by copyright protection has expired, they can now be used. But actually, there is also a broader, sort of more behavioral notion of the public domain, which includes other things. So it includes like components, for example, and elements of protected materials that can be used for free. For example, ideas under the idea expression dichotomy, meaning that you're free to borrow and build upon existing ideas that underpin protected works, or de minimis uses of protected materials. So if you use a part that is is not creative enough to attract copyright protection. So for each of these topics on the copyrightuser.eu website, you can find guidance. So if you click on ideas, for example, it'll take you to the section of the commentary about the public domain, about idea and expression, explaining in slightly more detail what I'm just talking about now. And the same thing for the minimis. So you click there, it will take you to the relevant bit of the commentary on the public domain. Then what can be considered another component of the public domain are works distributed under open licenses, like Creative Commons licenses. Same here, you click on that, you get to the bit about Creative Commons and other open licenses. So that's a sort of a peculiar part of the public domain, because unlike the other elements that constitute the public domain, open licenses are not an example of a use of a work without permission, but is actually an example of using a work where permission has been granted to everyone. So it is still can be considered public domain because the use of the work is free for everyone, but it can come with permission, is not without permission, and permission can be can come with conditions like attribution, for example, or even more restrictive one like that you can't make derivative works out of that work. Another substantial element of the broader notion of the public domain are copyright exceptions. And here on copyrightuser.eu, we provide more detailed guidance. So there is a whole section of the website dedicated to exceptions. So if you click on exceptions there, first you will find another infographic giving you an overview of the copyright exceptions that EU copyright law provides. So copyright exceptions are basically cases where you can use parts of a protected work or even entire copyright protected works for certain specific purposes that are permitted by law. And in a nutshell, under EU copyright law, there are exceptions that are mandatory, meaning that all member states should have implemented them in their national legislation, and other that are optional, so that the member state can choose to implement them or not. And here we group them also in 4 main categories, depending on the sort of fundamental rights or public interests that they try to pursue. And again, then if you click on read more, you will find a whole section on exceptions, which again is divided into guidance about mandatory exceptions and guidance on the exceptions that are optional. To conclude, and to sort of as a bridge to the following presentations, we of course also provide guidance on copyright duration, which is the focus of today's session. So if you click here on out of copyright works, then the first step is a new infographic with a few timelines of the different durations of copyright depending on the type of work you're dealing with. So I'm sure you hear more from the following speakers about this, but generally speaking, the main rules on duration under EU copyright law are the following. So for literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works, generally the duration is life of the author plus 70 years, meaning that 70 years after the death of the author, all the works created by that author enter the public domain and everyone can reuse them for free. There is a similar but more complicated rule for films. So it's still 70 years after the death of the authors. But here, the persons you need to consider are the director of the film, the author of the screenplay, and also, I don't know why it doesn't appear here, but also the author of the dialogue and the composer of the music, specially created for the film. So if you want to find out whether a film is in the public domain, then you need to find out when all those 4 different people, whether they've died and when, and if 70 years have passed since the death of the last to die of those 4 people, then the film will be in the public domain. Similar provision for works of joint authorship. So works of joint authorship are works where, which are the result of the contributions of 2 or more people, but where you can't really distinguish the contribution of each author. And so say, for example, a song with melody and lyrics where 2 or 3 people both sort of equally contributed to both the lyrics and the melody, that will make it a work of joint authorship. And again, like in films, the copyright in all the elements of that work, so in this example, both the lyrics and the melody, will expire 70 years after the death of the last to die of all joint authors. There are also specific provisions on anonymous and pseudonymous works. So these are in copyright for 70 years after the work was made available to the public. However, if during those 70 years the identity of the author is revealed, then the general rule starts to apply. So it becomes life of the author plus 70 years. Then there are what are known as more entrepreneurial types of works, like sound recordings and broadcasts. So here the duration is not calculated in relation to the life or death of the author, but it's 50 years from when the recording was made or when a performance took place. However, again, like with the one I just explained, if during those 50 years the recording is published, then it's 70 years from the date of publication. For broadcasts is 50 years from the first transmission of the broadcast. And finally, moral rights are subject to different rules, so the level of harmonization is not that high. So in all jurisdictions, moral rights exist for life of the author and usually for 70 years after the death of the author. So that's the case, for example, in the United Kingdom. But then in some EU jurisdictions like France or Italy, moral rights are actually perpetual, so they never expire. And so that's just a quick illustration of the main rules. But again, you can then find more detailed guidance if you click on read more. You will find a commentary explaining duration in a bit more detail. And then if you scroll down, you can find guidance which is specific to certain types of works, like audiovisual works, musical works, and so on. And then, like all the other commentaries and pages on copyrightuser.eu, at the bottom of the page, you will also find relevant research on that topic, the legislation that regulates, in this case, duration, both at the international and the EU level, and also a list of judgments of the Court of Justice of the European Union, in this case, again, on copyright duration. So yeah, so that's copyrightuser.eu in a nutshell. Feel free to go to the website and play with it. And that's also the end of my presentation. But yeah, if you have any comments or questions, please let me know. Ellen, back to you.
Thank you, Bart. Very handy, a lot of information. So if there are any specific questions somebody would like to raise, if not, well, you can raise hands or something. If not, I suggest that,
I have a question. Thanks for a lovely presentation. It's great to see all the detailed information there. To what extent can people use copyrightuser.eu and are certain that the same rules apply in their own jurisdictions? Have you made a determination of that?
So you mean whether they can use the content of the website, or
Yeah.
how they can... Yeah, the content of the website is distributed under Creative Commons attribution
No,
rights.
I mean, how, if they can trust that the same term is applied in their own jurisdiction.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So to make the resource manageable and sustainable, the resource focuses on EU copyright law. So we try to focus on what is harmonized at the EU level, which is, I mean, is quite a lot. But yeah, that's a really good point. Fundamentally, copyright law is territorial in nature, meaning that different laws apply in different countries. And I think that's probably true for duration as well. At least there are some sort of peculiarities in each jurisdiction. But I think it's a very good starting point to get your head around, duration or other topics, and sort of make your own informed decisions. But then you also, in the commentaries and the guidance, we make it clear, what's harmonized and what you can sort of trust is, will be the same in other jurisdiction, but where also you need to go and check other sources to see what may be different in your own jurisdiction. Yeah, but yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Thank you.
all right. Anybody else? Then Maarten, you can continue. So Maarten is also a member of the steering group, and he's here as IP Squared. He's a consultant for a lot of archival institutions, works on a lot of legal documents, but also more practical tools. And one of them has been the public domain tool that he will demonstrate to you now, explain a bit how it works and how you can use it in your own practice. Maarten, you are sharing your screen?
I am working on it. If I can find it. Looks like. Go. I am sharing my screen if this works.
Yeah.
It's paused.
Yes,
There we
this
go.
works now, Maarten.
And what are you seeing? Are you seeing
Public domain calculators 2023?
So, yeah, we should have tested this beforehand. Let me try this one more time. Let's see. Choose for this. That is this. Yeah, it's this screen. Okay, now I know where I am. I am presenting basically 15-year-old research, which is quite old. It's these are public domain calculators from a research project that started at Europeana in 2009, and the Europeana Connect project back then. That was a while ago. And we were tasked to making public domain calculators. These calculators are still valuable resources and can still be updated if you want, and still are open for usage. They have a slightly different focus than copyrightuser.eu because they really dive into the local legislation and start with the local legislation instead of the European one. So it flips the perspective. And it also means that per jurisdiction, so whether it's the Netherlands or Belgium, France, you can see how the legislation on the term of copyright protection changes. So the website is available at outofcopyright.eu, and that redirects you to this page here, where we can see a list of public domain calculators of I think 27 jurisdictions at that time. That might have changed since then. We're talking about 2011. This tool allows you to click through a flowchart or a diagram, which you can see here. You can still see the diagram now? Yeah, thank you. So this diagram, if I click on it, I'm not certain if it, yeah. You can still see the, what are you seeing now? I lost my screen.
We see a part of the decision tree now.
Okay, thank you.
So the upper parts, I think.
Yeah. Apologies for that.
Yeah, you need to, yeah, centralize it a bit.
So this is the decision process that we've researched back in 2009 to 2011. And it goes into all different categories of copyright protected work or neighboring rights protected work, where it first asks the question into which category a work falls, which can be a database, a literary artistic work, a performance, a phonogram, or a fixation of film. And then when you choose one of those, it asks the next question, which in the end turns out whether something is in the public domain or still protected by copyright. If we go back to that information page, you can click through those questions when you go into the main page, where you can click, for example, a literary artistic work. And then it asks what type of author does this work have. For example, if you click on a natural person, then it asks which nationality the person had, for example, European Economic Area, whether it's a collective work, just like Bart already discussed, that it can have an impact on the term of protection. Has it been published or communicated? Also, what we already saw in those lovely diagrams, which sometimes are way better than these ones. And did the last surviving author die more than 70 years ago? If the answer is yes, then the result becomes public domain. And you have all the questions that you have answered above, which means you can also print this entire result and have like a real research overview. Like I've done these steps and these are my conclusions. So that is the public domain calculators that were made for Europeana over a decade ago. These flowcharts and the resources are all Creative Commons licensed, which means we can also still change them. And this website also shows or has opportunities to update the flowcharts. So, for example, the law has changed since 2011 until now, especially the term of protection for neighboring rights has been updated for 50 to 70 years in some cases. This is not reflected in the 2011 ones. So if you are a lawyer in a certain jurisdiction, then you can still update these flowcharts. We have on the top right corner of the website, we have a process and methodology to update the flowcharts and send them back to me, and I can make them available. We can also make them available in your language if you want. You can follow the same procedure, download it, update it, translate it, send the document back to me, and we can make this available to you in your own jurisdiction, in your own language. And that is basically my presentation. Any questions concerning this? No one.
Yeah. So I think it's good if you try to apply this, just you can download the things. It's easy. I've tried it. So it looks difficult, but actually the basic decisions are fairly straightforward. And well, it makes it easier to take the steps. So it's certainly worth trying and worth updating, Maarten.
Yeah, so basically it's a flowchart tool that can be run from a website and is completely visual. So you can just put it in a box and draw a new line and then draw a new line. And that's all you need to do, and just update the text within those boxes. It's very easy to do. It just takes some thinking about. And I see
There's a question in the chat also, Maarten. Can you see the chat?
Yeah.
Okay.
How can you know what countries are updated in the calculator? So if you go to the main page of the calculators, the public domain calculators, only the Netherlands, where I have legal expertise and has been updated to 2023. All the other jurisdictions are still in 2011. If you have a new decision process for me, I update this page and add you to the 2023 version. Then I see a question from Jess. Are the steps of the question results available via an API? No, they're not. But given your jurisdiction, maybe the next speaker has maybe some interesting perspective of more automated calculations instead of this manual step-through process. Any other questions?
Okay. No more questions. Then I suppose this brings us to Bart, who is actually a colleague from mine, and he will demo one of the tools we've been actually implementing quite a lot lately to make it easier for heritage institutions to calculate public domain status of works in their collections, but on a large scale. So we looked at ways how we could automate this, and that's how we developed this tool, Bart.
Right.
But I leave for you. He's the expert on this.
I will be sharing my screen as well. If all goes well, you are seeing a full screen Google presentation right now. Okay.
Yes.
I see. Thumbs up. All right. So public domain tool is a tool developed by Memo, where I work for. The announcement of these office hours said that public domain calculations are not simple, and that's true, of course. I think we've seen that in the previous presentations as well. It's a complex world, and good guidance there is needed very often. But the good news today is that in some specific cases it is simple, and that's the cases where we actually wanted to focus on with the public domain tool, trying to automate those cases where it is simple, where this one-by-one approach is maybe a bit an overkill, or is not needed, or makes you spend a lot of time in defining whether an object in your collection is in the public domain or not. So that's where we try to focus on this automation, or semi-automation at least, of the identification of public domain content in collections. And that's based on your own metadata, like what type of work it is, what are the names and birth and death dates of creators, when was a work created. So that's typically the kind of metadata that you often have yourself in a collection. But we also wanted to use data available on Wikidata, especially data about creators, that we could use to combine with your own metadata. So what's the process? You start from a CSV export with your own collection data. You upload that in the public domain tool, and then you get back proposed matches to your creators. So creators that are available on Wikidata, that have an item on Wikidata, and that are part of your collection. What you get back is an enriched CSV with birth and death dates from Wikidata added, the identification of a right status, external identifiers, a public domain date, and at the same time, data about the creators from your collection are also added or enriched on Wikidata, which is a great help for other heritage institutions who want to use Wikidata for their own purposes. So there are some limitations. What this tool does is actually a very small part of it's trying to automate a very small part of that decision tree that Martin just showed, or some of the aspects that Bart also showed. So it's only about copyright. It's not about neighboring rights, not about privacy concerns or ethical concerns. It starts from the idea of that the copyright duration is 70 years after the death of the author. Also important to say it's only about the object, because sometimes you may want to know the copyright status, or you may want to know what you can publish online, photographic reproduction of a work. But of course, in some cases, especially with 3D works, that's even more complex, because then there might be another layer of copyright on the reproduction. So here we say when you give the tool data about the object, it is of course the copyright states about the object that has been determined, not necessarily the photographic reproduction. So this tool is ideal to deal with the simplest kind of cases where there is one copyright holder per object. It's not undoable to have objects with multiple creators and use that also in this public domain tool. But just be aware that the tool will process one line in your CSV at a time, and it might need some extra consideration to derive a copyright status of a more complex object from that. We also say that this tool is not really legal advice, but we try to be very conservative in the way automatic calculations are being made. The most straightforward way is, of course, when we have a death date of a creator, then you can easily say 71 years after the year of death is the public domain date. When we don't have a year of death, we use the creation date of a work or the birth date of a creator, then we count 171 years. So that accounts for, I mean, that makes it work for people who may become very old and may have created work at a very young age. The tool is also in Dutch, which may seem a bigger barrier than it is, because like the need of language is quite limited. And just know that we at Memo are also there to help you. If you don't speak Dutch, you want to use a tool, you need some help with that, just contact us and we help you to get started. I will show like the whole process, how that works. So I just took a quite random data set that I could find through an API. Here it is a collection of works in several museums in Antwerp, and I basically searched in the API for all works that have Europe in the title, which give me an XML that I got into OpenRefine to clean the data a little bit to make sure that I have the right columns and only the right columns, and leads me to something like this. So typically you have a work URL or a work ID, the type of work, a creation date, a location, which is in this case always empty. So none of these data are mandatory, but of course, the more information you can get out of your own system, the better. There's a name of creator. In this case, we even don't have any birth or death years, no external identifiers. So this is an example of a rather basic data set, but we will try that anyway. The work URL leads you to the DUM system of the city of Antwerp. And in this case, like I took data from the book collection of the Hendrik Conscience Heritage Library in Antwerp, and I have a CSV to start with, and I go to publicdomaintool.be, and then the process starts where you enter your email address, the Wikidata ID, the QID of your organization, of your heritage organization, in this case, the one of the Hendrik Conscience Heritage Library. I upload this CSV, and then it says it has been added to the queue. A couple of moments later, you get an email saying that first step has been completed. So depending on how big your data set is, it might take a little bit longer, but like in this case, 6 rows, it will be there in a couple of minutes. So there's 2 links in this confirmation email. The first is CSV download, what comes back from the tool, and the second link is the one you need to proceed to step 2. So let's take a look at the CSV that comes back after step 1. I open it, and it gives you a CSV that is a little bit enriched. You'll see in a moment. So this looks good. Yeah, I recommend using either LibreOffice or Google spreadsheets to do that, because we've seen we've experienced that especially Microsoft Excel is very eager to try to interpret your data in a way that might change like data formats and stuff like that. So that's just a small thing to remember. What you have here is an extra column with Wikidata items. These are suggestions that come back from the tool based on the text string from in your creator column and the type of work. So for example, for books, the system will primarily search for authors with a name string that correspond to the one in your data. So there's already a little bit of smart features, let's say. So the manual work that remains is the validation whether these suggestions are correct or not. In this case, we see Gaspar Scioppius, Gaspar Schoppe has created work in 1620. That's perfectly possible within this birth and death dates of the suggested item. It is a scholar who published, so that seems to be a correct suggestion. We have Adriaan van Schriek. You see there are, Cornelis de Bij. There are 2 suggestions that comes back, so only one can be correct, or none of both are possibly correct. So that's something to check. In this case, we see that the first was born too early, and the second one wasn't even born yet when the book was published. So in this case, the 2 suggestions will be incorrect. There's one special case here where I see a name. People familiar with Belgian politics will recognize the name. It's a Belgian politician, and it's might be a bit strange that he's not the Wikidata item is not suggested here. It's just because there is also like it's programmed that because there are such a lot of politicians and athletes, for example, in Wikidata, which very rarely become part of cultural heritage collections. These are a bit left out, but in cases there are, you come across a name that of which you say, well, it's practically impossible that this person is not in Wikidata. It's still possible to manually add this Wikidata item. So the idea is in this Wikidata column H that you saw, that the correct Wikidata QIDs are left there, incorrect ones are deleted from the CSV. You save the CSV again, and you upload that in step 2. So that was the second link that came back from the email that you see here. There is also asked what the QID of your data set or database is. In this case, this is the collection website of the city of Antwerp. That's needed to properly reference statements in Wikidata based on your own data. So you can you can say whether you want to write data to Wikidata or not. In this case, I say I want to do that. A few moments later, you get a second email back saying that step 2 has been completed, and you get the enriched CSV, which we have a look at now. You see that birth and death dates have been added there based on information available in Wikidata. There's no death date for Mark Eskens for the simple reason that he's still alive. And there are other things added as well. But let's have a look. Yeah, so I just take the 2 screens again. Let's take a look at how these data have been enriched. You see also a Wikidata queue number for each line now, even the ones who weren't present on Wikidata before. So this is an example of an already existing Wikidata item where we can see that a couple of things have been added based on the collection data. For example, occupation author was not there yet, and there is the reference URL which leads you directly to the collection database. There is a statement saying that this person has been active in 1620. Let's now look at another example. Adriaan van Schrik is one of those people that weren't available on Wikidata yet. Now a new Wikidata item has been created by the public domain tool based on the data from your CSV, saying it's a human being who is an author. That's derived from the fact that he has written a book. He was active in 1615. The reference for that is the metadata available at the collection website, which you find here. And the last statement that was added to Wikidata was the fact that this person has work in the collection of the Hendrik Conscience Heritage Library. Other things here are, for example, VIAF numbers. It's also taken from Wikidata. You see also the copyright status, which is either in copyright, public domain, or unknown, based on the available data that are combined from the original data and Wikidata. For Mark Eskens, it's of course unknown when he will die. So we take the birth date here as a way to determine the copyright or the public domain date, which was the last column that you saw. So it's a way to try to automate this, either based on the death date, either based on the creation date or the birth date. But as I explained, then you have rather conservative calculations that are pretty safe. This is again like the type of columns that come back from the in the CSV file. I translated those, but I think it was pretty clear from previous example what they were. So what happens on Wikidata, part of the tool is also this public domain tool bot that adds creator data to Wikidata. It's a great way to increase your online visibility as a cultural heritage institution. It's actually a very easy way to put linked open data in practice without needing any other infrastructure yourself. And it's a great help to your colleagues who maybe have collection items made by the same creators in their collection. And so it's perfectly possible, as you saw, also that that certain data are available in your own data, but not yet on Wikidata, or vice versa. There are also some dashboards on Wikidata. For example, here, it's basically just a Wikidata query, visualizing how many of these creators that have work in Belgian cultural heritage institutions are in the public domain, are copyright protected or unknown. You can also see it per institution, and these numbers change, of course. This is a screenshot from 2 years ago, I think. This is a more recent one, and you see how this number of creators has available in Wikidata, that's of course important to say, has increased, and that also the percentage of creators whose work is in the public domain changes over time. That's an example of one institution where they can see, okay, this amount of our creators are in the public domain, another part is copyright protected, another part is unknown. And especially these unknowns are, of course, interesting also to take a look at, because very often with a little bit of extra research, it's possible to identify a copyright status, for example, because you can find that this person born in 1901 has died in a certain year, for example, that again makes it possible to publish extra data to mark data as public domain once they are no longer copyright protected. These are a couple of links with more information on Memo's website. A couple of years ago, there was also an article on Europeana Pro. There is the website itself, of course, and you can always contact me with more questions now or later. So I think that's it.